Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pod-Gata Defenders podcast, the only podcast that will let you cast the power. Hello, everyone on the internet. Welcome to the first ever episode of the CableBash podcast. I am your host, Multi126789, other known as Multi-Man, other known as Cyril. We got my two other lovely co-hosts for this episode. We got
Trey Sampson, hi.
And my name is Shaquan Sampson, otherwise known as Shaq is Game Online.
and welcome to the first ever Pod-Gata Defenders podcast, the only podcast that is a podcast about the GataDefenders. Welcome to the channel. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all in with open hugs and claps. Yeah, woo, clap, yeah, woo, we're here. So, first of all, this episode is going to be the first episode ever, so if it sounds scuffed, it's because we are recording in a very isolated room, but we're going to be sharing one mic because that's how this first podcast is going to go. And before we start anything else, I'd just like to thank a few of the people that we're going to mention right now at the beginning. First of all, I would like to thank Dangerous VHSs, because if you want to go ahead and watch any of these episodes, down in the description below, you can click and go ahead and watch any of these episodes for the GataDefenders for free. No extra charge, no paying for 3 different subscription services. You can just watch it free on YouTube. Thanks to them for allowing us to go ahead and have this privilege of being able to watch the show. And also, if you ever want to get in contact with us because you want to either be a part of the show, or if you have any questions or anything for us, you can always put that at CableBashPC at gmail.com. That's CableBashPodCast or PC at gmail.com. All right, so how's everybody feeling? First of all, before we start,
I'm feeling pretty good, to be honest.
I mean, I watched through the episodes. I'm pretty interested to talk about these, honestly. Like, it's been going pretty well.
all right, and also you probably noticed that the 3 little icons on the bottom right are our 3 guests. Going from left to right, we got going right to left, that's me, Cyril from Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Then we got Android 17 as Shaq, and then we have Asta from Black Clover as Trey. So we're going to go ahead and quickly run down the format of our show here on the CableBashPodCast for anybody who's interested. Basically, we're going to talk about the 4 episodes that we watched, because this series has 52 episodes. So I decided to split it up into 4 episodes because that comes out into an even number. So if you're ever interested in watching any of these episodes, again, down in the description you can. But we talk about 4 of them in chunks, and then we're going to go over and talk about all of the main plot for each of them. Then we're going to discuss, our favorite parts as we go through and talk about all of the stuff that happened in each episode. Then at the end of it, we're going to talk about things we liked, things we didn't like. And then at the very end of the episode, we're going to do the last 2 things, which is ranking the episodes we would watch again, because this is a podcast about cable television. The whole thing that I want to add or bring to the flavor table is, like, we're not ranking them like we would like a game or whatever, where we say 1 to 10. No, we just rank them as in, these are the episodes that we would personally probably watch if we had the chance to watch it again, like if it was regular television, where we'd be like, oh, I would stay on the channel to rewatch this episode, rather than being like, okay, time to go check to see what's on any other channel. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how excited we are to watch the next batch of content, because, each batch of videos, or, sorry, not videos, but episodes we watch, basically is going to determine whether or not we're going to be really have a lot of energy for the next episode or not. So, without further ado, I guess we should get started. I'm going to be doing basically most of the recaps for each of the episodes. So, we're going to go ahead and start off with episode 1. So, episode 1 is, all of the episodes actually have titles, which is surprising, because I don't remember them having titles. Like, most television now, I don't think, have titles for their actual episodes, unless you were to search them up on, like, streaming services, where then they would have the subtitles, but they don't usually show them. But anyways, episode 1, Trouble in Paradise. First of all, my first note of the of our episode, OP is a banger. It's a really good OP. The only reason I think I wanted to do this podcast to begin with is because I was getting nostalgia baited for this show, so I went out of my way to then go ahead and listening to the opening, and I'm like, man, this opening still kind of slaps. I'm like, even after all these years, I'm like, it is a simple OP, but it's basically memorable just due to the fact of how unique it is, and it's not meshes in with any other type of opening that I would have saw around that time. And also it was Canadian television, so it was on Teletoon. So anyways, basically, so we're gonna first start off because this is a lot of plot heavy episode. It's okay, so we're first gonna talk about Ragnarok. Had there's 8 main elements in the show that I'm gonna list off now because I'm hoping that I wrote them correctly because there's a lot of them. We got Nega, we got Yin, we got Yang, we got Omega, we got Infinus, we got Sanction, and we got Severs and Altos. Those are the 8 main elements that make up the world of Aragos. Anyways, basically it starts off by basically front-loading us with saying, here's the plot of the show by being the evil Mazmule, a guy who seems to be evil and wants the power of the 8 stones to create a very destructive being called the Megalith. The 8 sacred emeralds, the 8 sacred stones will summon the Megalith and basically destroy the whole world because he wants power for them. And basically, the GataDefenders were there to be oh, yo, hey, plus ratio, you can't be evil. And then he's well, we'll see about that. Then moving on, as those guys were fighting the Megalith, they realized, we can't take this guy down and plus his whole entire army and basically make it back alive. So they basically summon mages and be okay, we need you to seal this thing into 4 separate dice. So already we said, oh, here's the 8 dice that we have being the main 8 elements in the show. Because again, me personally, I know that they've had a video game. I don't know if they had the actual physical game that's still around, or if I could look online to see if the GataDefenders had a physical game, because this seems like one of those shows that was literally made for merchandise bait. Seriously?
That would make sense, true. It, seems like one of those, Pokemon type games or shows that are, Beyblade type, made to sell stuff,
Yeah, because, also, around this time, Chaotix was another thing where it's kind of similar to something like Pokemon, but more like Magic, where it's okay, you get this one creature and then he does a random thing in the episode where he summons an ability and you're how does this work? And they're don't worry, it's a show, you don't have to worry about that. But anyways, getting back on topic, Mazmule, the guy who's the evil guy, basically gets ratioed by them, and the GataDefenders win after sealing the Megalith. But apparently the Megalith, since it was summoned, it basically is only being sealed away, so it's still something that exists in the universe, but it's something that they gotta take care of at some point. So, and that's basically the first 5 minutes of the episode being oh, here's all the GataDefenders. Here's Mazmule, the evil guy who got ratioed and died, who doesn't die because you literally see in the intro that he's still alive but just a skeleton now. But, we won't talk about that until the next set of episodes. And then, by the way, the children of the 5 heroes were basically taken away and said, okay, we're going to abduct your children so we can raise them to become warriors. It's okay, but could you ask our permission? No. And so they got abducted, and now this is where we get to basically the real true start of the episode. So basically the first start of the episode is, hey, they live in this magical field that basically makes it so that they're hidden. They're hidden in the leaves, Hidden Leaf Village. I know, it's a funny joke. But basically they are in this forest, a bird flies through the forest field, and then it reveals that, oh man, they're hiding away in this place. So then we get the first look at some of the main characters of the series. We get introduced to Eric and Kara, the first 2, the brother and sister of this group, which confused me only because they don't have the same hair color, and usually in animes when they don't have the same hair color, you raise an eyebrow is when they say they're siblings, but we won't look into it. Anyways, They basically start off by showing that Eric is the guy who's the techie guy, and he shows his little guardian going and helping him work on something. And Kara's like, "Oh, what are you making, brother?" I'm not going to say what I was going to say because they're related in the show, apparently. So I can't make the bad joke. But anyways, after that, then also the next person comes in, and it's Mel, and who's like, "Oh, wow, you're making something? That's pretty cool. Can't wait for it to explode in your face." And then literally because it's early 2000s media, it's like, it explodes in his face. Wow, what a surprise. And so basically my read when I was watching this, because again, this was my first time watching it after like, probably several years. I'm like, okay, Eric's the tinkerer guy. Kara, and I'm like, oh, I saw her little guardian, it's a firefly. I'm like, oh, she's the animal whisperer, I get it. Then Mel, I'm like, okay, she has a cool crystal thing, so she's definitely like the mage or the person who uses magical abilities that we won't talk about until they talk about it, which they'll talk about it eventually, but we won't bring it up. And then finally we meet our last main character, which is Seth, who, of course, he eats a lot. And I'm like, okay, wow, they really did bring every trope from, like, early animes into these characters. And again, I'd like to remind you that this is a Canadian TV show, so, like, I can't roast them too hard because they're trying something different that I don't think Teletoon at the time really was too interested in doing. Because, I mean, at that point, 2006 is when they started making Johnny Test, and let's not talk about that, okay? Let's not talk about that. We're not doing that podcast yet, or hopefully ever. Anyways, so basically, everything happens. Seth then calls his guardian, his little rock guardian, to come help him make food, and then he's like, Kara, could you toast my bread for me? And she's like, sure. So then she puts her foot on the table. She puts her shoes on the table, not her foot, because that was the case. I would have put something worse in my notes. Yeah. But anyway, she puts her rocket boots on the table, and then she basically kills his summon, his guardian, with one shot of a flame blast. Basically destroys the toast and kills the guardian. She starts laughing maniacally, and I'm like, she's gonna become a killer in this series, isn't she? I'm like, I hope that she uses her boots for that cool sort of thing, because it did like a lot of damage. Anyways, that doesn't happen. But anyways, I probably am showing now the funny animation that I time-stamped in my notes, because they're... Okay, this is a 2006 show, so it's kind of not animated the best, and it's Canadian, so you guys can roast us all you want, but it's still kind of funny and sort of impressive. Not really, but that's okay. And then we get introduced to the professor, who's Professor Elm. He's a hologram, I guess, but I guess he's like, okay, it's time for doing training. Kara and Eric, you can go read books. Seth and Mel, we're going to the battleground. He's like, okay, and then we get to the first battle of the series where it's like, okay, we're going to explain the rules that are not going to matter after this episode. That's basically how it goes. So this is how the battle starts. It's like, okay, they're like, cast the power. And then the professor's like, whoa, Seth, you only used 2 stones to get 1 shield? Mel put up 3. You may have a lot of attack, but you have very little defense. I'm like, is this gonna matter, or are you just bringing this up because you're trying to explain a game about how it's supposed to work? And he's like, that's fine. And then Seth says the line of the episode, which both combinates in the worst line and also the funny the funny face that you see for the thumbnail, where he's like, that's okay, Professor Elm, she's a woman, so I don't think I'll lose to her, ha ha ha. And then she's like, wow, that's so like misogynistic. Anyways, I'm gonna ratio you. And she basically, and then it cuts to her basically beating Seth for like the next little bit, because she's like, I have strategy, what do you have? And he's like, well, misogyny. And then he does the smug face, and then it cuts. But then after that, after she basically knocks out his guardian, which is Gregis, I think? Yes, I believe that's what the name is. We skip to then being like, yo, okay, we're now going to be going to the villains. I think, is it the villains first? Hold up. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so yeah, then we get... Because the show has a really good tendency of like, okay, we're gonna show the villains in the episode even if they're not doing that much because we don't want to like dedicate full episodes for like really side plots. Like every episode in the series, as of what I've watched at this point, I'm like they will always have like an either just an A plot or an A and a B plot, but they will never not do more than that. But they will always try to even it out so it's not too awkward. But we cut to Lord Bragus, which is the understudy of Masmule, obviously. And basically he was like, yo, where are these people, bro? Like, we be trying to find these kids that they abducted from the heroes because we know they're alive. We gotta find them for some reason. Then I'm like, that's kind of weird that, like, this evil organization is more interested in finding kids than, like, the stones that need to be making their big boss monster. But whatever. Anyways, let's see. Then we cut back to the battle with Eric and Mel. Seth and Mel. And anyways, basically Seth is like, okay, cool, you may have ratioed me in the first half of this battle, but now allow me to do a really cool technique called protagonist privilege, where I'm now going to use my shredding attack to knock you off the stage, and that counts as a technical win, I guess. So that's basically what happens, kind of. No, that is what happens. But also then we talk about what Eric or Kara are doing, and basically they're like, yo, man, Kara's like, big bro, I really hate that we can't travel the world. When can I go out on my own? If anybody watched Pinocchio, the live-action 2020 movie, the real story of Pinocchio, you would understand that bit. Anyways, and then Eric's like, well, Kara, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, we'll get to leave eventually. And then all of a sudden he summons his guardians like, watch, you want to see my cool guardian's wings? And he knocks over a bunch of bookshelves, and then Kara's like, haha, you're going to get roasted and detention and ratioed. And then, anyways, then it comes back to the battle. We already explained what happened where your boy Seth says, haha, even though you have a lot of defense, if I knock you off of your block and make you fall onto the ground, that means you still lose. So, okay. I'm like, I guess defense never did matter, huh? Anyways, as that happens, an earthquake randomly happens as that happens in the battle. And then it causes Professor Elm, who's in... I don't know if it's one of the Pure Stones or not, but the way that it makes it seem is like it's one of the Pure Stones or a hologram stone, because there's a lot of stones in this series that they will just be like, oh yeah, there's a stone for this. They won't explain it. They'll just be like, yeah, there's a stone that's a specific this, and it has this effect. And I'm like, okay, but how was it made?
Yeah, they do that a lot, honestly.
And it's like, yo, they'll just don't think about it, and just say anything is this. I'm like, okay, whatever. We won't talk about it. But after this earthquake happens, right, it then causes the force field barrier to basically just get disrupted. So it's like, I guess the seal is now broken. And then it's like, well, okay, that's cool. And then it cuts back to the bad guys. And then this is my favorite scene in the episode, because they're like, so then we get cut back, and then it's Bragus is talking to his underling named Flinch, because he's Flinch, but he also looks like Neo-Cortex from Crash Bandicoot. Like, every time I hear him speak and I look at him, like, this guy's supposed to have an N on his head. But I'm like, maybe they didn't have an N on his head because they already have Nega as an element in this show. Also, if you're all wondering, yes, we're black, but also it's Naga, so don't get too twisted about it, okay?
Don't worry, we ain't saying the N-word.
But also, that will be a thing that I talk about for the next episode, because that's my favorite scene in the episode. Anyways, but then here comes my favorite scene of the episode, which will be played after I explain it. Flinch is like, oh, Lord Bragus, I have news. And he's like, what is it? And then he's like, well, we found where the GataDefenders are, and you can stop ratioing me. And then he's like, oh, that's good. That's very good. And he makes, as you can see, that's the other thumbnail for this episode. Or other part of the thumbnail for this episode, because those smug faces, every time in the show that they do a smug face for a character, I lose my absolute shit because it's funny. I'm like, the animation team knew how to make the characters emote in the worst and best way possible, and I'm like, I've never seen better representation of a shit-eating grin in animation for a while. So, like, when I see this, I was like, man, they really didn't pull their punches with how funny it looks. But anyways, after that, Professor Elm is then, like, it cuts back to the guys, and they're like, wow, what happened, Professor Elm? And he's like, well, it seems like the Megalith's power is now starting to break away from the seals. That's why our force field got disrupted by the earthquake that was caused by it. Which I'm like, wow, that's pretty big thing not to realize that, that you abducted kids and not, help any of the older GataDefenders or have anybody else looking out for the stones in those areas. So, that they can take care of it, but whatever. Then he's like, okay, well, you guys gotta leave now, because even though your guys' training isn't finished, which is gonna be a big sticking point for the next episode, which we'll talk about. But, like, he's like, okay, here's a map. Here's a stone that your father gave you, Seth. We're about to get ready to make you guys leave because we got to finish up this episode. And also, we may be being watched. Because apparently the evil group has a bunch of crows that are technologically advanced that have cameras on them. Which is nice. I'm like, that's very convenient for them. Because I'm like, that's, I think, the smartest evil villain thing I think I've seen. Where it's, like, literally inconspicuous to the point where unless people know that they have crows, they probably won't do anything about it. But anyways, those guys get ready to pack, and basically it's like cuts back to the villains where we now get to meet Malco in the middle. Malco in the middle, and he's like, Bragas is like, okay, Flinch, I'm sending you out in the field. I know you're not a fighter, so I'm going to send somebody with you. And he's like, please not, Malco, please. I don't want anybody but him. And then he stands behind him and he's like, Malco, how's it going? And he punches him. And then Flinch dies for like the first time in the series out of many. This will happen a lot to Flinch, but it's okay because that's why he's one of my favorite antagonists in this show. Anyways, Malco and Flinch are now ordered to go and follow those kids, and then, that's basically it. We cut to them basically finishing up packing and being like, Seth is like, I'm the leader because, like my dad, I gotta lead my team and tell them that it's gonna be okay. And then they do this really weird scene where they're starting to walk out while it plays, like, this triumphant music. And it's really awkward because it goes on for, like, a minute and a half, or, like, close to a minute and a half. And I'm like, they really didn't have to show me them walking. Like, we're almost at, like, the last 5 to 10 minutes of the episode. You really don't have to show me this, but I guess. But anyways, then suddenly they get attacked by a giant killer snake, like, out of nowhere, because as they're walking out, I guess the earthquake summoned the snake, and it's like, it's me, motherfucker, do you like Sonic Adventure? Because I'm like him, but for real, though. And then, anyways, so that happens, and then, okay, so again, we know that their training isn't finished, so they try to fight this thing, and for some reason they decide, oh man, we just started off in the level 1 area, and here's the level 86 Snake Gonzalez from Xenoblade. He's now gonna kill us because we can't actually do anything. But anyways, they try fighting, they don't succeed. They try fighting, they don't succeed. They try fighting, they damage it a little, but apparently this thing has regen for some reason, and you're like, okay, well this is kind of bad. They're already going to die in the first episode. But then they're like, okay, everybody, we only have one thing we can do, and we got to use all of our stone energy. Again, this doesn't really get explained how stone energy works, other than I guess it uses up a certain amount of the resources to use stones. Or it must use some of their life energy, I guess, because they don't really explain how stones work, other than they throw a combination of stone and say a name. But you don't understand how the combinations work, just sometimes they work if you add certain amounts. Because even in the first battle that we see in this episode, it's like, yeah, he threw these 3 stones and it turned into this. Does it make any sense for us viewers? No, we just think it's cool. And then we just go, okay, I can't wait for them to use this in this battle, and then they'll never use it. Anyways, talking about the last of this episode so we can wrap this up, they use their overpowered move called Warrior Henge, where they basically all grab hands and they make this big homing laser that literally eradicates anything. Because literally it's so OD, it kills the snake in one shot, and literally wipes them of all their stone energy. They celebrate because they won, but they had to use their last-ditch effort desperation move, which will be foreshadowing for later. But that's episode 1, so now I'm going to bring it over to these guys, because those guys kind of just listened to me go off about the first episode. So, like, do you guys have anything to add? Because, I mean, the first episode was pretty good for our first episode, explaining everything and not explaining certain other things. But as we get on with the show, you kind of just accept that some of the things that happen in the show are like, okay, this is rules that they're establishing that probably won't actually like go to the actual game that they're probably trying to sell. But
Yeah. One thing I liked, honestly, is how long was this made ago again? Wasn't it like 4 years?
Well, I think over the course of actual airing on TV, I think it was like 3 or 4 years because again, it only had 52 episodes. So that's about, if I can math, that's about almost 30 hours of content. So.
Yeah, honestly, I'm really surprised because usually in like shows and anime and stuff, you really don't see that many black characters in like a normal show. So them actually having like a black character, it was really surprising for me because they usually don't have like a black character in any shows, honestly.
Which character? Oh yeah, okay. For like, for Mel and the one of the GataDefenders, yeah. Because around that time, they're probably were trying to, especially for like an anime, yeah. Because I mean, I'm trying to think. Because I mean. Even in anime, still, they don't represent people of other cultures all that well sometimes. But, when you do, you're like, yeah, small fist bump. And I'm like, as long as they don't get the large lip treatment, that's pretty okay.
Yep.
I mean, I guess to explain it a bit better, because, like, it wasn't really went into in too much detail, the character designs themselves are really interesting, because everybody has their own unique, like, different style of how they look. Like, Eric, who's the more techie guy, he's got orangey hair, more like orange bronze style, like armor and stuff that he wears around.
Because I'm guessing, one of the elements I'm guessing that is also in the show that, because again, all of the elements have association with a certain element too. I'm guessing his is like metal/earth, but like Seth is technically the earth.
Yeah.
Kara is technically the wind. Mel is the ice. He is technically metal or steel or something like that because I'm guessing that's what they're going to use for him. Because we see in another episode, another character has another element, but we won't talk about him until we get to that episode and when he uses it. But like each different types of stones have certain elements and that's why they mix and match them to get certain spells. Which is why, hopefully later in the shows, they'll tell us how the element like works when it like comes to combining certain elements and like can only people who have a very big affinity to one element can only make certain cast or whatever, but you know.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Because, like, then Kara, she's definitely, you can tell she's the youngest one, probably by at least maybe, like, 3, 4, 5 years younger.
Yeah, because in the scene where, at the beginning where it shows them getting taken away to be trained, she was literally an infant while the other ones were, like, small children.
Yeah, so, like, she's smaller. She's got, like, yellowish more hair than her brother, who has orange, which really makes me wonder what their parents' genetics were like, because that's a very odd combination to have.
Because I guess one of the characters, in the main 5 of the GataDefenders was bald, so who knows, he could have been blonde before he shaved it all off. But, like, that's like that. I'm like, I'm not Mr. Fantastic, but I'm not stretching this or anything, but, you know. But yeah, also it might be because she's younger, and once you get to a certain age, your hair actually turns into whatever color that your parents' hair is, because by that point you're fully developed, and then it just kind of, you transform into them slightly, so.
Yeah.
But anything else about episode 1? Because, I mean, other than that, I'm like, as a beginning show, I'm like, my interest was kept the whole time. So, for me, I'm not, like, disappointed.
Yeah, the only thing I'd have to say is I like how they actually struggled for the, like, first monster they faced, because they didn't have, like, all their training done.
Yeah.
And so them struggling is actually like, a good thing in the show, since they didn't have all their training.
I was just saying, all I will say is that I'm glad that it shows that they struggled, but, like, also that, like, they are incompetent, but, like, this thing that they fought literally was, like, 5 times their level. Like, they literally were like, yo, this is our first battle, and it's like, bro, we had to bring out, like, the riskiest move that we had to do to kill it, which is kind of like, oh, man, I really hope that doesn't foreshadow anything in the future. Anyways.
Yeah, I gotta say, I really like the character designs and stuff. Like, Mal, she's black with her, like, more blue-white to contrast with, like, her ice abilities and stuff. Seth, because Seth has these little, like, bluish tattoos around his, like, eyes, and a little blue streak through the middle of his hair with, like, black hair on the sides of it.
And his is black and red because of his stone, and then Kara has, you know, the blue and green to represent the wind. Also, one thing that I will say that they never really mention Kara's boots at all. Well, they will in another episode that we're going to talk about in here in a bit. But I'm like, they never really talk about her boots or why she needs them or why she has them. But I guess it will be something that we talk about later because I'm like, okay, why does she have boots? It's like, she just has cool boots. It's a part of the fine.
That's what I was always thinking, because like I was wondering like the whole time. I was like, does everyone else have these boots and I just didn't realize or something? But like it seems it's like only Kara with these boots, because like I guess she needs them to walk or something.
But again, it won't be explained until a few episodes. Not even a few episodes later. It will be brought up again in a few episodes, but it won't be talked about probably until we reach double-digit episodes. But anyways, that's going to be it for episode 1. I think we basically went over everything we liked and disliked about that episode. So let's go ahead to episode 2, The Road Less Travel. The opening's still a banger. Sorry. And basically the episode starts off with Seth being like to Eric, okay, we're fighting, bro. You gotta be serious about this fight. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna use this attack. And then Seth is like, you're a fool, because I have this attack that you're trying to challenge, but it's actually stronger than yours. And then it's like, okay, how does this work? Cut to Mel and Kara talking. Okay, so I'm not going to lie to you guys, okay? I'm going to already tell you the ranking. This is on the bottom of my list of rankings, because this episode, we go from episode 1 where I'm like, oh, I'm excited to watch the rest of this, to episode 2 where it's like, wow, this just dropped off pretty bad. This is like the Morbius, but of this like set of episodes. It's actually kind of like, why? I understand why this episode is, but like, it's really bad. Anyways, so we cut to Kara and Mel, and they're like talking, and they're like, Kara's like, man, Mel, I know that I was excited to leave the dojo, but we've been lost in the same woods for like a week. I paused the actual, episode, and I'm like, these dudes have been walking in the same woods for a week? What? And then I'm like, Mel's like, don't worry, this map is hard to read, and she turns it around, I'm like, oh, this is what the character type is also going to be. She can't read maps. I'm like, no, not another Zorro.
Man's going to get lost 20 times.
And again, this is the only thing that makes me mad in the episode. I'm like, I'm glad that they didn't show that they were lost in the woods for a week by making 7 episodes that they were being lost in the woods for the week, but it makes me mad because I'm like, bro, like, none of you have abilities like to summon people that can fly or do anything to get like a bearing of your surroundings. Let's not talk about it. Anyways, that happens. Then Eric gets zeroed to death by Seth because Seth is like, haha, I have all these tricks that you don't know how to deal with, Eric. And he's like, the only thing that with Eric is that he overthinks because he's a thinker and he's a tinkerer. So that's kind of his thing.
It's like for his Gata stones, he uses more like technological based things. Like most of his seem more like self-created and stuff, as to where the others it kind of feels like more natural flowing, like they gain these abilities, but it feels like he made his, as like he has one ability that's a huge hammer, which he calls the Mega Impact Object.
Yeah.
Because he says, and quote, it sounds cooler than a hammer.
And I was like, yes, I was like, yeah, well, I'm glad that you decided to make a naming scheme. And then he hit his small orb and it broke immediately. And he's like, by the way, because my energy move is densified, it actually becomes stronger. I'm like, okay, but how does that work? And he's like, won't explain, get zeroed to death. And then it cuts to the bad guys, where it's like Bragus is telling Flinch and Malco being like, find the keystone, because apparently the keystone is the key to finding the 4 individual pure stones that are holding the megalith. So if you got that, you need the MacGuffin to find the other MacGuffins.
Yeah.
That's basically all you need to know.
But also one thing I want to add is how long have they been in like the dojo before they left? Do we know that or no?
Well, they're all basically young teenagers, except Kara, who probably is just almost an adolescent teen. So I think they said 10 years in the first episode, but that's I think a rough estimate, because again, they probably were hoping to train them before they became adults. But I'm like, they're still young adolescents, so, and that gets talked about a lot during the next couple of episodes, and it basically being like their maturity levels. So okay, so moving on from that, after the bad guys have their talk, let's see, basically then they're starting to walk through the woods, and it's like we get a sight of bandits who are whistling, And again, we can only see it, but those guys can't. Also, the bandit that we see whistling definitely does not look like Seth's brother. It definitely does not look like Seth's brother. Like, what are you guys talking about? This guy definitely won't turn out to be his brother and, like, the 5th member of the GataDefenders. Just like how they had 5 of them in the beginning. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, bro.
He doesn't have, like, the same design or hair design or anything, like, about him. Like, you know. Anyways, then it cuts to Kara being like, guys, do you hear that sound? It doesn't sound like a bird. And then Eric's like, how do you know what a bird sounds like? And then Kara says, because I study all these animals because I'm the animal one, plus plus you only tinker with machines, plus you never touch grass, and then that's the end of Kara ratioing her brother. But anyways, I just wanted to make that basically because in my notes that's basically what I said. Kara ratios her brother because it's like, oh, you know what animal sounds like? You don't even touch grass. Anyways, moving on from that. Anyways, as Kara and them finally realize after they keep walking, they're like, oh man, it seemed like it was a group of bandits who were now going to rob them. And they're like, so Seth is like, oh man, this bandit's going to rob us. There's only 1 of you and 4 of us. And then more of them appear and he's like, damn, I should have cut my mouth shut. And then it does the funniest thing. This is my funny scene that I'm going to play because I'm telling you this, but you guys get to see it and hear it if you're watching the podcast on YouTube. Basically, it does that. He's like, I should have kept my mouth shut. And then it cuts to the transfer screen that says, nigga. And then what's the funny, it's unironically the funniest thing because we know that it's an element, but also that's how everybody's feeling when watching that moment in the episode because it's like, bro, of course he said that, and now of course he got surrounded. Me and my big mouth. Nigga. And then that's how that ends. So I'm just like, bro, I know they cut to a commercial break, but of course they chose the funniest one. That's the funniest thing and the best thing in this episode. I'm sorry, but all the rest of this episode is really bad.
Because that's the thing. Through every episode, halfway through, they have, because in the old TV styles, they have it where it will cut out, it will play some sort of transition, you get the ads for, like, cable TV, cuts back in, plays a different transition, you're back in. But with this one, it's every time it has a different element in it. And I didn't really notice it until watching through the second one, where it just like cut out nigga. I was like, what did it say?
I was like, even the people who wrote this episode was like, bro, this is such a fucking stupid joke. But it's like, well, that's why it was funny when it cut to that, because I'm like, they knew what they did when they did that one. Anyways, so then it comes back from the quote unquote commercial break. And they can't fight, they can't do anything, so this is where I get annoyed in this episode, because, okay, so now they're going to explain rules that didn't really kind of apply to the last episode, okay? So now they're surrounded by bandits. There's like 5 bandits, I think, surrounding them on all sides. They're like, okay, guys, put up barriers. Okay, they put up barriers. Then the other guys start using their Gata stones and start pelting them with, like, this rock move that basically starts attacking all of their shields all at once. Now, Eric is like, okay, I'm going to do a smart idea, and I'm going to use this move that I have with launching them at the enemy. So he does this move, I forget what it is, but it's like the fire...
Yeah, it's like a flame blast, right?
Flame blast, yes, where he shoots a flame at them. And then they dodge out of the way, deflects off a rock. Okay, a fire attack deflects off the rock. Again, a fire attack deflects off a rock and hits their shield, dealing damage to their shield, and then Seth was like, Eric, what are you doing, you dum-dum?
And then he was just like, I've got this team, bro. I forgot we on a team.
But then he's like, bro, what are you doing? Don't you know that we can't use our Gata stones up close? I'm like, what do you mean? You literally, last episode, you and Mel were fighting when basically we're less than, like, 5 feet from each other. Maybe a little bit more, but, like, if he was to shoot that at point blank, they wouldn't have had the time to react to it like they did in the actual animation. Because these guys literally waited until the last second to get a perfect dodge or something. Because I'm like, nah, they would have got hit. They would have definitely got hit. And then they're like, so this is also why I get annoyed, because I'm like, oh, by the way, they have guardians. Do they summon them?
No.
So explain to me why we can't use our range stuff, guys. So why don't we use our close-up guardians?
Because
we can't use our stones, guys. that's their... And I'm like, okay, this episode is really bad. I hate this. They can't fight. They can't do anything. They can't fight. Anyways, Seth is like, okay, maybe we gotta do something else. And then Kara's like, maybe I can use VMOF. And then he's like, haha, you're really funny. Anyways, Mel, you want to use yours instead of hers? Again, this is foreboding. Seth saying that he shouldn't use VMOF is very foreboding for like the next couple of episodes where I'm going to get mad every time I see VMOF. Because VMOF literally gets to do nothing every episode that it appears in. Like, even in the last episode where it gets to do something, it dies. Like, within, 10 seconds of it being summoned. Which makes me so pissed off.
It's like, it's really weird the way this, like, it operates off of Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 1 rules, where, like, oh, the way this duel is gonna go down is that I'm gonna keep drawing cards until I win. But don't you lose if you draw all your cards?
No.
Not in Season 1. It's
No.
like, we, pretty much until they know what they're doing, they just kind of change around the rules to suit whatever the plot needs. So, like, that's just probably gonna be a trend for a while.
And me, I'm like, the thing isn't that the thing that makes me mad is that they did have an option, they just didn't use it. Because anyways, Mel summons her dragon, her Draco, Sub-Zero.
Yep.
Get over here from Mortal Kombat. Anyways, it flies up in the sky, and then one of the bandits says, plus ratio, I got a thing that gives antimatter to your dragon so they can't fly anymore and it goes crashing somewhere else. I'm like, wow, that's so useful, guys. So you gotta summon your Kragus and Robus now?
Nope.
And then they're like, no, sorry, we don't know how to fight. We don't know how to fight this episode. Anyways, one of the bandits that definitely doesn't look like Seth's brother decides to say, okay, maybe I can get this really cool stone from this guy if I go ahead and take out the bandits I was with. So then he plus ratios and literally...
Yeah.
So, first of all, this episode, this guy comes in and just has a regular weapon and just deals with these guys. Which makes me mad because I'm like, shouldn't the GataDefenders also have regular weapons and not just stones just in case of something like this? Which makes me mad because we will never bring this up again. But after that I was like, bro, why don't you guys get actual weapons? They're like, we got our stones. And I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't seem to know how to use them. But anyways, we get introduced to this guy. His name is Adam. And basically, as he introduces himself, Mel and Kara are like, oh my gosh, he's so cool, he's so hot. And then Seth is like, wow, I don't like this guy already. He kind of looks like me, but he's not me. But he kind of looks like me, and he's trying to take one of my female interests away from me. Like, I'm about the ratio of this man.
There's so much tension in the air of different varieties when Adam arrives. Because all the guys are looking at him like, I don't know if I trust this guy. And all the girls are looking at him like, I think I trust this guy a bit too much, you know? Like,
and I'm like, okay, thank you for the subplot of... this character has romance with this new character who does something cool. And then he's like, and then one of the bandits was like, bro, you were with us? And then he hits him and knocks him out before he can finish. And he's like, and then Seth was like, bro, you were literally with those bandits. And he's like, well, if I was a bandit, wouldn't I have a bandit cloak too? And then it falls on his head. And it's like, haha, see, it's a funny joke because it literally showed that he was a bandit. And then he runs into Seth. Now, this is a very big plot point that nobody will catch on if you weren't paying attention at the first time. But when he ran into Seth, he actually took the stone that his father had and basically was like, haha, I pickpocketed him by having the sheet over my head and knocking into him because I couldn't pretend to see. Get it? And then he just thought I was being dumb. And anyways, he's like, okay, well, it was nice meeting you guys. I guess I gotta run. And then they're like, wow, he was kind of cool and handsome. And then Seth was like, for once in my life, I actually don't have an appetite. And then he starts walking away because, again, that's his whole gimmick.
It comes out of nowhere because it has nothing to do with what's currently happening. It's like all the guys were just defeated. They're like, dang, we kind of just got ratioed. And he's like, yeah, and I'm not even hungry anymore. And then they just continue on.
Well, the thing is that, it's showing that Seth is like, oh, he likes Mel a little bit, and so there's like, wow, I'm kind of disgusted that this man just came out here, and then she's goggling over him. I'm like, for once in my life, I guess I'm not hungry, so I guess we better get going.
It's like such an awkward transition in between the two, though.
Yeah, also the stone is called the Nova Stone. I just wanted to let you know, because Nova Scotia... people out here being like, yeah, the Nova Scone.
Yes,
they named the stone after a place that people don't talk about or even know that exists.
Nova Scotia.
Okay, and then we go we're gonna speed through the rest of this episode because nothing happens basically after that part of the episode. Mel basically is like, okay, I'm gonna start reading the map and listening to music, and then everybody makes the Wojak face because she can't sing very well. So you'll see it on the screen right now. The Wojak face that they all make that makes me laugh and cry and being like, okay, this is also a good part of the episode because I'm like, they were above their time making the Wojak face in that episode where they're like, oh, she can't sing for shit. But I'm like, come on, man, she's not that bad. But then it's like, it shows that the birds are flying away when she starts singing, and then they start covering their ears. Yeah. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, this is again where the thing comes in where they just add in random stones when they need it. Because she puts on, like, headphone stones when she sings.
Well, it's not even stones, it's just like, they have advanced technology, but sometimes they don't.
It's weird.
And we will talk about that when we get to episode 4, because that you want to talk about advanced technology, we'll talk about episode 4 when we get there, but boy, oh boy. Okay, so now I'm just going to basically speed run the rest of this episode.
They get jumped by frogs, essentially.
Well, no, I'm going to explain it for them. So, they get to a bridge. They decide to do something stupid, which was jump on the bridge, break the rope. As they tried to cross, the bridge breaks. Your girl loses VMOF. Once again, VMOF getting ratioed again out of this episode because, again, VMOF for whatever reason just says, lol, anytime VMOF is mentioned or is in the show, they'll always get dunked on for no reason. Mel's like, okay, the bridge breaks, the robot, Eric summons Robodis to hold the bridge, but then he didn't realize that the string was breaking, so it then breaks, and then Mel's now trapped on the other side of the chasm. But at least the rest of the bridge goes down towards a swamp area. So she goes down there, and then she gets jumped by frogs that basically do the equivalent of, if anybody played Kingdom Hearts 3, when Kyra gets her wrist grabbed, the frogs use their tongue to grab her wrist hand, which had stones in them, where she was going to fight back, and she lost them in the swamp. And then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, oh look, Dream Boy Adam comes out and saves her. And then the frogs randomly run away after he's like, if you don't leave, I'm going to have to make you leave. In the, what's it called? I was trying to think of the voice, anyways, it's fine. It was the, yeah, it's fine, we're not going to make this joke. Because anyways, we're going to continue talking about this episode and finishing it off. So basically, yeah, Adam's like, cool, I saved you. And then she's like, oh, wow, you're so dreamy and so cool. And then anyways, then it comes back to the other team where they're like, wow, we're lost. We don't know where to go. I guess we're going to sleep out, I guess. Hopefully Mel's okay. Then it comes back to Mel and Adam. And then the frogs come back and he's like, okay, we pretended to be, like, weak. So can you give us a stone we promised? And he's like, haha. I was joking about that, and then he grabs him by the throat, and he's like, okay, please don't kill me! He has a Yamcha moment, he's like, here, take the stone! And then he's like, yeah, get out of our swamp, because I'm Shrek, and then they leave. And then Mel's like, wow, you're actually kind of a dumbass, you kind of smell, and you look bad. And he's like, well, at least I'm not a bad singer. Yeah, because, again, she starts singing while he's escorting her, and then basically, that happens, and then after that, it's like, okay, undisclosed amount of time, they both split up and go separate ways because they have the argument follow, and then they split up, and then, the other group, with Seth, Kara, and Eric basically wake up to some creature is digging through their bags and their food, and then starts running away from them. They run into Mel, who's like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, sorry, we're trying to get our food back. And she's like, well, it's nice to see you guys too. And then basically, we also I didn't talk about this, but I guess we'll talk about it now. There was a cut in between those guys thinking about going to sleep, and after Mel and Adam's little fallout, where the enemies were like, can we borrow some cups of sugar from this academy where they're holding the stones? And then they're like, no. And then Malco, the big guy, who's like, I'm about to be a brick house in here, and they brass down the door, and he's like, so about that cup of sugar. Because basically the episode ends as those guys chase down the creature trying to get back the food. They realize they made it to the academy. They're like, yeah, we made it just in time. And then it starts exploding. And then it's like, well, it seems like our adventure is about to end before it even begins. And I'm like, with this episode, it felt like that. But that's the end of the episode.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is, so Melko is his name, right?
Yeah, Melko, yeah.
Yeah, Melko. I feel like Melko and the other guy, I forget the other guy's name.
Flinch?
Yeah, Melko and Flinch. I feel like Flinch is like Bruce Banner, and then Melko is like the Hulk, almost the version of that. I just feel like that.
You see that meme in them? Yes.
Yeah, I love Flinch's voice actor so much because he has that classic, like the stereotypical nerd emoji.
Yes.
It's me, Flinch. Master Brackus, please.
Malco, please let go of me. You're strangling me. Anyways, but yeah, that's the end of the episode. Episode 2 was pretty garbage. I hated it. Like literally, the only thing that made me mad is literally they said, forget that they have any options. The episode. They can't fight anything. They don't have any options. Mel could have summoned her dragon. Oh, I should mention this. Mel did summon her dragon to find Vemoth, so then she couldn't summon it again. Because apparently it was out for too long. And then I'm like, so there's a time limit. And then they're like, I guess it is. And then when she got knocked out, she's like, oh, I will summon my dragon for just a few seconds to, like, help me. But she's like, no, I guess it has to rest from now for, like, another 5 hours before I can summon it again.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing with the first couple episodes where they just kind of add and delete rules as they need it.
But the only episode that is really bad is this one. Because, like, literally they said they can't fight or can't do anything even though they literally have training and they literally have options. You're not allowed to use any of them because we got to make Adam look cool this entire episode, I guess. But I'm like, whatever. I don't know if you do have anything else to add to, like, episode 2. Because episode 2, again, in my ratings, this is already the bottom. This is the bottom of, like, my chart of, like, where I would rank these episodes.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it is. It's just so slow-paced because they can't do anything the entire episode. It feels like they're stuck. Like, it's like when you're grinding in the game and you need to, like, grind all the way up to a certain level, but you're getting, like, 1 XP per thing.
No, it's like, it's not that. It's like when you're a video game reviewer and you don't look at the tutorials and being like, oh yeah, I have these options. I wish I read the tutorials.
Yeah, energy.
It's
I wish I learned how to press the jump button in, Cuphead. Oh, I wish I learned to pay attention to the tutorials that told me how to do this basic movement option that you'll be using 90% of the game.
It's like it's a really weird thing. I can definitely see why this would be like the lowest of the 4 so far. Like we'll probably have to review the others just so I can like get my bearings back together, but it makes sense. I definitely feel like, out of all of them, it's definitely the lowest. I like the introduction of Adam, because he's an interesting character, but...
That's definitely not Seth's brother, yeah.
Yeah, we nobody even brings up the fact that they look the exact same.
No, he's just this cool dude who's just kind of ratioed them with literally a stick. Yeah.
That's the thing that makes me mad, is like he appears for literally like 3 seconds, defeats everything that's in their way, and then like Mal is like, oh my goodness, you are so interesting and hot and I want to talk to you more. And I'm looking at a Seth just like, yeah, you're kind of ugly, dog, you gotta get out of here, bro. Like you clearly aren't contributing much to the story, being like the main character and all. It just feels like the introduction of him, like, whenever he's on the same screen as Seth, it's so weird feeling.
It's so weird feeling because they definitely aren't brothers. Anyways. But, is that everything what you guys want to say about episode 2?
Yeah, I say that's all I have. It was pretty bad, honestly.
Okay.
So, like, 5.5 out of 10.
See, I'm not even ranking it because ranking episode 2 is basically giving it any sort of attention that it deserves. And I'm like, episode 2 was literally the Adam episode where it's like the GataDefenders don't know how to do anything now that they have real combat against real humans, and they're like, never played PvP before, wonder if it's any fun. It's like when you're playing like a single player game and then you finally go to PvP and you realize how toxic it is because everybody's been playing it longer than you have, and you're like, wow, I don't like playing this anymore.
Yeah, essentially Elden Ring's PvP.
But anyways, on to episode 3, the key to victory. Okay, we're gonna speedrun this one a little bit because it's pretty self-contained. So basically after the last episode, it cuts back to them looking at the monastery. Also, I guess I should have mentioned in the last episode, Elena, the woman who's in the beginning of the opening cutscene, was in the second episode where they're like, the GataDefenders are coming because they realize that the Pure Stones are bad. The only reason I didn't mention it because literally we get to see more of her this episode, and literally last time she was only on for like the first like minute of the episode, but then I completely forgot about her because the relevance that those guys had at the monastery was like zilch, other than Malco and Flinch were going there to try to beat them to the key. Anyways, key to victory. They've realized the monastery is getting destroyed. They're trying to make their way in, but they're like, wow, this place is crumbling to pieces. Whoever's in there is really making a mess. Then the anteater looking like being who took their stuff was like, hey, over here, dummy. And because Seth was like, okay, we're going to go in guns and blazing and lose. That's basically his plan. And then the anteater was like, because Kara, again, the animal whisperer, was like, he's trying to lead us somewhere. We should follow him. And then we're like, okay, I guess we're going with them. And then they take them to an elevator.
It's like, it's a weird thing I don't completely understand, but I like his introduction as, like, he's trying to make this plan formulate. Seth is like, alright, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go do this exactly. We're going to go in. I'm going to do a tuck and roll through the floor and throw my dice. And then Mal is just like, okay, so what do we do if there's a little gray guy just following us? And he goes, well, it's pretty unlikely that'll happen, Mal. But
you know, if that happens, I'll smoke him too. But anyway, so then they make it to this elevator that it led them to. Then he disappeared while they went in the elevator. Then we turn out that Seth is part Dragon Slayer from Fairy Tail, because anything that has mobile transportation makes him puke up his guts. He's like, oh, and then they have a scene where all the other characters look at Seth as he's vomiting on this moving thing, and then it's like, wow, that's cool. I can't wait for more vomit in the future, I guess. Yeah. Anyways, then once they get to the top of the elevator, it stops literally right outside of the door where all the monks in the monastery are basically getting ratioed by Malco, because apparently he's way too strong for these monks, even though there's like probably more than 50 of them in this place, but they're like getting ratioed one by one. So Mel and Eric are looking at this outside, and it's like, Flinch is like, well, we're trying to find this key, but if you don't speak up, I'm gonna have to make my friend punch you, and it's gonna hurt a lot. And they're like, we will not speak. And then it's like, okay, I told you, okay, Malcolm, go ahead and do whatever you want. And then, so this is the funniest scene in the episode, because then those guys start talking about, like, oh wow, those guys are here and they're trying to get the key. And then all you hear in the background is the monks and stuff screaming and being in pain. You hear this in the background as they're talking, and I'm laughing because I'm like, imagine having a conversation as you see and hear people getting murdered in the background. It's like, what? Okay, I guess that's what they're doing. So, it's literally the funniest thing in this episode, because literally they're talking nonchalantly about, oh wow, these guys are here for the key. Well, man, we should probably think of a plan, because that guy looks really strong. And all you hear is the monks going, please help me! And I was like,
what makes it even funnier is that, like, while this is going on, Eric is looking through the crack in the door while he's talking back to his team. So, like, they're all like, okay, we need to formulate a plan, come up with this quick. Well, Eric is just sitting there watching the monks get beat to death by this, like, 10-foot tall, 4 billion pound monstrosity of a man.
Yeah, like, that's what makes that scene so funny, because I'm like, it's not the fact that they're getting beaten up is funny, it's the fact that those guys are just watching it happen and being like, yeah, we'll help you guys when we figure out something, okay?
He turns to Seth, he's like, Seth, what's our next move? Seth is like, move? We shouldn't do that, because he's still, like, really sick, and he's like, I got it. You're right, Seth. We shouldn't move. We should just wait in here until everything dies down and then go do things after.
But anyways, after those guys stop beating up the monks, they're like, that's okay. We'll just find the key without you guys. And we're going to lock you up in this prison thing that will make you so you can't use your dice, and we'll leave. And then they leave. Those guys come out of the door after watching those guys get beat up. And those guys were like, hey, why did you watch us get beat up? And he's like, never mind that. We're here for the key. And then they're like, okay, well, if you go over here, you can find the key. And then they're like, okay, we're going to go ahead and split up and find the key. And then I'm like, that's not going to end up badly. Anyways, after that, what happens next? Let's see. Meanwhile, because then it cuts to a meanwhile with Adam, because Adam's like, okay, well, you know, I was trying to make a good impression on Mel, but I kind of screwed up, and now I lost their stone too, so I should probably go get it back. So then he goes back to the march with the Toads, and they're like, we thought we told your ass to get gone. And he's like, well, I need that stone back, actually. I kind of borrowed it, and he's like, what are you going to do about it? We're not giving it back. And he's like, oh, you're giving it back. Then he uses the cloak of invisibility to disappear, and the frogs are like, Nani? And then he's like, Umai wa kumes deu. And then he throws dice at them, basically capturing them with his dice skill.
Yeah.
Ratioing these frogs so hard that they are like, okay, we'll give you back the stone, please. Just please don't kill us. And he's like, thank you.
Yeah, he just used the invisible cloak from Harry Potter, bro.
Yeah, he literally said, you can't see me.
Plus 10 to your deception, dog.
Yep.
And then basically he gets back to Nova Stone, and then, you know, then it goes, let's see, oh yeah, okay. And then after that, after he gets back to Stone. The two teams that split up is Seth and Kara go one way, and then Eric and Mel were going another way. But then Eric decides to stick back to see if he can defuse the thing for the monks. And while he's doing that, Mel decides to go walk around to see if she can't find anything. And then she runs into Adam, who... Okay, so first they run into Flinch, who's like, What are you doing here? And she's like, well, we're going to put you down. Draco, ice! Sub-Zero, and summons it, and then starts attacking him and starts beating him, like, really bad. And then, Adam shows up out of nowhere and being like, yo, did you need any help? And then they start arguing for, like, a good 30 seconds in episode. Like, this is not a joke. And then, because Flinch then decides to summon his Guardian, which is a Scarecrow, by the way, which is kind of cool. I think I liked his design for his Guardian, which also, just to make note, Malco has not shown his Guardian yet in this episode, or any of the episodes, so it makes me think, does he have a Guardian, or he's just his own Guardian? Because maybe that's the case, or maybe he's wearing his Guardian, and maybe that's how he has armor.
He's probably guarding his Guardian, honestly.
Probably. If my Guardian dies, I die, so I gotta protect it with all my strength. Anyways, but yeah, so basically now we get the bad part of the episode where they completely argue over who's gonna be taking care of Flinch, who summoned his Guardian, and then he's like, okay, if you guys are going to argue, I'm going to leave, and they'll continue to argue, and he's like, haha, and then he just leaves and says, wow, you guys are really bad at this, and he leaves. Literally, that was the whole scene. I'm like, wow, I'm so glad that Adam and Mel had an argument to literally let this guy get away for, like, literally 30 seconds. 15 to 30 seconds of this episode with that, and I'm like, wow, that was bad.
Like, it contributed literally nothing. Like,
other than to show me that I'm like, wow, women and men do be arguing. Relationships do be being shattered. Anyways, so then we meet up with Seth and Kara meet up with the priest, Anastasia. I'm pretty sure what her name is. If not, whatever. Basically, she's like, okay, I know where the key is, guys. Follow me. And then Malco, of course, sees them out of the corner of their eye as they go into the room. And then Flinch and Malco both found them and like, oh, you found the key for us. How lucky. And then he's like, eat this. And he's like, what is that? And then it disables them and puts them in a force field. Kara's boots turn off because, again, her energy, I guess, that was being fused into her shoes were like, I can't stand up, Seth. What am I supposed to do? And he's like, not panic, I guess. And he's like, I don't know what we can do. And then he throws the dice at the force field. Obviously, it doesn't work because he literally explained to the other monks while they were getting beat up that you can't use stone energy while inside of it. And then Flinch starts laughing and goes, ka. And then Malco's like, okay. And then they're like, how do you open the key? And they're like, why would she tell you? And then they're like, Malco's like, I'll open it with my fist. And he's like, ugh. And then he just starts beating it up for a while. And then Flinch is like, okay, well, the bonehead does that. I'm going to go look around for, a way to open it.
One thing I would add is, so he said you can't use stone energy inside the thing, right? And so that means Kara boots, right? They're made out of stone energy, or they use stone energy.
Yeah.
And so my question is, will the stone energy ever run out? Like, does she have to replenish it, or does she replenish it while she's sleeping?
I'm guessing because, again, it's explained in the later episodes, because, spoiler alert, I watched up to episode 8 already, but I'm not talking about anything past episode 4, because that's what we're basically talking about. Some of the stuff, like the sigils and stuff, and like the mechanics of how the stone energy works, is basically, most of the stone energy that the stones are using are based off the land, so as long as there's land and like the energy from whatever source that they're trying to use, like let's say wind or earth or fire is around, they can probably use the energy as long as that corresponding stone with around that. But like her shoes basically are based off of like these energy things that her brother put in for her for whatever reason, because again we still haven't explained why she can't walk without these boots, but it's whatever. But anyways, moving on. Basically, then Eric is like, okay, after helping the monks, he starts walking over and he's like, damn, well, I see that those guys got trapped. And then he's like, all right, now it's time for my big brain idea. And so he summons his guardian, Robodus, as a small form to lure Flinch. And he's like, whoa, bro, did you make that cool antimatter pack that makes it so people can't use energy? And he's like, yeah, I did. I'm definitely pretty cool. And then he's like, wow, does it have a backup generator support in case it goes down? And he's like, whoa, I didn't think of that. And he's like, oh, that's a shame. And then plus ratios him and electrocutes him and turns off the shield. And it's so funny because he's like, this is my favorite part of this episode because Eric's just like, he makes a face that's like, oh, I feel bad for you. And then he shocks him with Robotus, basically overloading the circuits for that force field. And basically now Eric, Kara, and Seth are basically now looking at Malco as then Mel enters and Adam enters, trying to protect the priestess and trying to get the keystone, because just as those guys got the shields deactivated and they were about to get ready to find a way to open the key, Malco actually finally breaks through the shield and says, haha, I told you my strength would work. And then he turns around and goes, and then sees those guys being like, okay, guess it's time for me to ratio you. And then they're like, okay guys, time to put up shields, because this is the only fight in the episode that means anything. Because the Mel one versus Flinch did not mean anything because they literally let him go. So, anyways, after that, basically they're like, okay, it's time to fight Malco, because how difficult could he be? You know, they try to fight him, and like, okay, this time I'm like, last episode I was mad because, you know, every character that they ran into, I felt like they could have been able to beat if they just used their heads for like more than 5 seconds and say, oh, we can do something, rather than saying we can't do anything. So, anyways, they start fighting Malco, and they start realizing something really quick. This guy has, because again, also I didn't mention this, but it showed up in the first episode. So Seth has a scouter that when he uses a scouter, it can determine the power of their defense. And they're like, what the heck? And he's like, what the hell? This man has like 10 defense. And he didn't even cast any stones. Which, again, probably like Mel's boots, he's wearing armor that basically is literally defense-oriented stuff that's on his body at all times. So they try to fight him. These guys are getting ratioed because he's way too strong. He doesn't take any damage from basically all of their attacks. He deflects attacks. He summons Kragus to even fight him 1v1, and this dude literally punches through him and summons dice and attacks them. They're like, bro, our shields are like gone. We gotta do something. So then they're like, okay, it's time to use our ratio beam like in the first episode, and we'll kill him like with that. So then they go ahead and do their warrior hedge again. They cold hands and they ratio beam him. And this guy had so much defense, the only thing it broke was his dice that was in his hand, but then this guy stood up and said, you may make me look like I'm wearing blackface, but I'm still gonna beat you. And I'm like, okay, well that's bad. And then Adam's like, oh, hey Seth, by the way, I got your stone back. You want to use that? And he's like, Seth was like, bro, you stole from me? I'm beating your ass later. And then he's like, anyways, I got the Nova Stone, so it's time for me to end this. So he's like, Nova? And then his arm starts radiating with some sort of strange energy. And then he does basically a big bang attack from Dragon Ball Z, shoots it at Malco. It doesn't kill him, it knocks him out of the building though because of how much energy it is. And then as it goes outside of the building, it starts exploding, and it does basically the equivalent of like a chaos blast radius amount of damage to some of the exterior of the building. And basically it's like, wow, that could have killed somebody. That's like a mini nuke. And Malco would have died if he didn't get just... when he got hit with the attack, got pushed back out of the way.
Yeah, it was strong. It didn't detonate on impact, because if it did, it would have killed everybody inside the monastery.
Yeah.
But instead, it pushed him directly through like 4 feet of solid like stone walls, until he and the monastery is up on a mountain, so he just flew off and fell into like the forest below.
So he fell from like quite a few feet, and like at this point we know this guy is built, so it's like. He probably didn't die from this, but like the fact that he was able to probably get pushed like that, he was like, damn, bro, like he literally pulled out everything against me. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, but the one thing I want to see is, so doesn't them using that ultra attack, doesn't it deplete all the energy?
Yeah, and I know, and then Seth was like, oh, by the way, I still have the Nova Stone, so I'm gonna use it now.
Yeah.
And I know, it's like, oh wow, we used all of our stone energy, but I guess I still have 1 stone. So I'm guessing stone energy just means that whatever they had in the reserves, they used in the channeling of that move. Because if that's not what that means, then I'm like, I don't know how he was able to harness the power of the Nova Stone, but whatever. He said, whatever, I have to protect my friends, and he did.
Yeah, they truly just make and delete rules.
And then after they celebrate doing that, Flinch says, he tries to pick up the key, and they're like, hey, where are you going with the key? And he's like, well, if I can't have it, no one can. And then ratios and blows up the key, and everybody's like, what the hell? He blew up the only way we can find the stones. And then Annalena, or whatever her name is, again, I really don't remember her name. She will not show up again after this episode. I promise you. She's like, oh, by the way, that wasn't the real keystone. I was actually holding on to it this whole entire time. And then she takes it off of her little thing that looks like a,
a walking cane, like a
yeah,
Yeah, cane.
like it's one of those priestess canes, basically. And then she takes the key out of that and says, here's the actual keystone. We were just pretending to have, like, a fancier looking one, so if somebody was to come in, they couldn't do that. And then they're like, yeah, cool, we're good. And then, by the way, then after that, it cuts back to the bad guys. It cuts back to Bragas, and he's like, first it cuts back to Malcolm and Flinch, who Flinch is on top of Malco, and he's coming back to Bragas being like, okay, so, we went to the monastery and we had the key. But then they kind of ratioed us, so then we destroyed the key. And he's like, what do you mean you destroyed the key?
Yeah,
and
he was like, you destroyed that key. I will destroy you in 2 seconds, Bill.
And then anyways, it comes back to Masmule, who's definitely not a skeleton, then definitely not him. But anyway, Masmule basically then punishes Bragas, and then it's like, wow, that's the end of the episode, I guess. And, yeah, that's all of episode 3. Episode 3 was 10 times better than episode 2, because I actually did try to fight. So, I mean, that at least gets that, but...
That's true. It feels like an odd way to end the episode. Like, I feel like they could have done at least, like, a bit more with it. But, like, I know time crunch and stuff for the episode's sake, so, like, I can understand it.
I mean, for me, I'm like, they paced itself well enough to be that 20 minutes of an episode. And it didn't really need to explain anything else other than, oh, Masmule is alive and he's a skeleton. But, like, if you look at the opening, it kind of spoils, like, everything that happens within the first 8 episodes, honestly.
That's true.
Which you don't know until you watch the episode and, like, oh, I remember that. That's from the opening.
Yeah.
But,
like...
No, you continue.
It's like the thing I know, it's like... Well, you'll see it within the transition to episode 3 to episode 4. It definitely feels like there should have been something in between there.
Oh, we'll get to that. But yeah, go ahead, Trey.
So the art design for, like, the entire show, I'm actually liking it so far. It's very good.
Yes. This is an early 2000s, like, trying to be an anime, but it's westernized. And to be honest, I'm like, the art style is actually pretty good, even if the animation isn't always good. Which we'll see a lot in, like, a few upcoming episodes, like, after, like, 4. But, like, even still, I'm like, I can still enjoy it because even though sometimes the characters can sometimes look really bad or really cheesy, I think it's actually to its advantage because that's why it made the show more memorable to me personally, because I'm like, it was such a unique style that I wouldn't expect a Western studio to make. And again, it was made in Canada in a French division, so... I was like, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool that a French-Canadian division literally made this entire, show. But, did you guys already talk about your favorite parts, or?
I'd have to say, at least my like, the thing that sticks out to me the most was definitely, like, when the guys are trapped, when Seth and Kaya are trapped, and they get freed, and Mal shows up, she comes in to save them, she's like, you guys got room for one more? So it's like... Yeah, we got all the main characters here. They're like, yeah, Mal is here. And then Adam, he like, in the cringiest, like, cheesiest fashion he could, he slides in behind her and goes, you mean 2 more?
Did somebody say I could bring a +1?
But my favorite scene is when they were just walking through the swamp, like, trying to get the stones, right? And then the fox would just say, hey, yo, we're gonna have to rob you real quick. Drop all your items, your belongings. We're gonna be taking that and dipping.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, well, are you talking about when Adam goes there and confronts the frog and then beats them up and then says, I'm taking my stone back?
Hey, yeah.
Okay. I thought you were talking about episode 2. I'm like, no, they got ratioed by the frog.
Yeah, we moved a bit further.
But no, I already talked about my 2 favorite parts of where Eric's like, oh, you made the thing, but you didn't remember a backup plan? That's disappointing. And then ratioed Flinch. and that was one of the funny parts. And then again, when the monks are getting beat up as they're having a casual conversation about what they should do next.
Yeah.
It's like those are the two things that in the episode for me personally were like the funniest things. But all right, so we're soon. Oh no, where we go ahead.
It's a more minor thing. It's a minor detail through the episode, but in the last like fight scene of what's actually going on, a fireball gets launched towards Eric, and it looks like he's about to get like ratioed hardcore. Mm-hmm. So his sister throws out some stones, and a flying magic carpet appears. So for the second, like the whole second half of this fight, which is probably like 2 to 3 minutes, he's just flying around on a magic carpet the whole time in the background. Just,
yeah, I can't wait for them to use that in the next episode. Anyways, all right, and moving on. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost there. I know it's been almost an hour and a half. Thank you for bearing with us. But now, episode 4, Snared. Okay, opening still a banger. Okay. But then we hard cut to pod racing. We hard cut to Star Wars. I'm like...
Yeah, like, what?
I'm like, okay, I guess they really didn't explain how they got these, but hey, I guess they got these. So we got into, like, Seth and all of the other guys, the GataDefenders, plus Adam, riding on the pod racers, I guess. And I'm like... Okay, I don't know where they got these, when they were made, or whatever, but I guess they're going now, I guess they're adventuring, which I'm like, I'm glad that the series doesn't like wasting its time, but you know. Anyways, Adam was like, oh man, you drive pretty slow, like a grandma, we'll drive in front of you, and he's like, or we can race to the camp, and then we can see who's better. And then Mel's like, come on, don't egg him on. And then he's like, whatever, I'll do it because I'm Seth and I hate you, Adam. And then Adam's like, okay, then prove that you're faster. Anyways, by the way, I like to mention that Seth did not get motion sickness on this. So whatever's in these vehicles that are the hovercrafts that definitely aren't a ripoff of Star Wars stuff, apparently Seth can ride. But again, I want you to know that certain transportation he cannot. It's just that this bike is the only exception to the rule because I guess whatever Eric did to these bikes made it so he doesn't get sick.
It's oddly specific why like that works, but like nothing else does. I also gotta say like, just so far through watching the episodes, Adam's probably gotta be my favorite character. Just like, there's something about him not contributing anything, but still contributing, like, everything. Like,
yeah, like, he's the character that you will see less of as the episodes after this fourth one will happen because of what happens in the rest of this episode. But, like, whether he's still, like, not, like, the main defender, he's like, I'll just join along because I think it's fun.
Whenever he's around, he's just, like, the focal point, but it's not because, like, it's not because he's naturally the focal point. It's because he forces himself into the main character role to flex on Seth.
This show only has 4 main characters. You mean 5? No, it says 4 in the script. Well, there's a 5th one now. You better buckle your pants. Anyways, they do the race. Seth now basically is winning, but then he crashes and basically breaks the vehicle. So, like, wow, good job. And then, after that happens, Seth and Adam have a fight because, you know, Seth is still mad at Adam being like, you really did steal from me, bro. I could punch you in the face right now, but I won't because I'm a GataDefender. But I could. You know, like those people who are like, I could fold you like a chair, but I won't because I'm a good person. And then he storms off. And then Mel's like, yo, Adam, you really should talk to him because, like, you're causing conflict where we really don't need it because we're already panicking trying to save the world. And he's like, I guess you're right, Mel. I guess I can go do that. And then Mel watches him leave, and she's like, I hate to see him go, but I love to watch him leave. Looking at him. And then Eric's like, do you think that's okay to leave those two by themselves? And she's like, yeah, they'll just talk. They're guys. They won't do anything weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
in case you can't tell, this is like an Adam episode. Like,
yeah, Adam. Bro.
Well, I mean, it's an Adam episode, but like rounding out Seth and Adam as like 2 people who are obviously trying to vie for, like, you know, leadership role.
Yeah. It's kind of like they're on the same screen, and it's just like Sonic Adventure 2. I found you, faker. Like, every time they're talking to each other.
Also, meanwhile, with super lock-on technology, somebody's spying from them from, like... Okay, so first of all, like, this character... We'll tell you his name because it's literally the title of this episode. His name is Snared. But he's okay. So like the way that it maps it like in this episode where he's all the way off in this floating stone out in the distance because again sometimes in this series rocks will just randomly float because I guess they have Gata energy in them or whatever. But he's looking for them like through binoculars like more than 100 feet away, and then he's like, okay, I found my targets, and then dead ass in this episode, careful now, Mel's walking around. Mel's walking around and he's then looking at her. And then she literally looks at the camera and says, something doesn't feel like, it feels like I'm being watched. Right at the guy who's looking at him. And at the people watching the episode, I'm like, okay, whatever. I guess she has spider sense, I guess. But I'm like, also that makes sense because, again, she's probably the arcane user, which we won't talk about until the next set of episodes after this. But, anyways, it was just off-putting for me where it's like, I understand what they're trying to do by saying she has supernatural powers different from her teammates, but I just thought it was really awkward that she's like being spied on, and then while he's looking at her at the glass, she's like, I think we're being watched, as he's still looking at he literally looks in the direction of where he's looking.
It's not like she just looks around to like get her bearings or like search, it's just like she looks directly at him.
Yeah, just like
it's directly at the camera, at the audience who was watching, and it's like, okay, this feels like a bit like you would see on any YouTube video where it's like, man, wouldn't it be funny if this was a video? Everybody turns towards the camera and then you hear the deadpan silence. But anyways, then after that, basically Snared summons his guardian, which is this little small guinea pig looking dog, looking rat, looking like thing. And then it cuts back to Seth and Adam, who are basically shouting at each other, being like, I don't care. If you are a good person, you stole from me. That was a gift from my dad. And they're like, okay, well, whatever, Seth. If you think you're so good, maybe we should battle so we can see if I deserve to stick with you guys. He's like, bring it on. So then they climb up this cliff. Wait, I'm trying to remember. They climb up this cliffside to an old area where it's basically houses like imagery of the old GataDefenders, I'm guessing. Or something related to them, because basically, they're like, oh, wow, look at this cool monolith. Yeah, this is what we're going to fight.
Yeah, they describe it in the show as, like, apparently it's old glyphics or, like, ruins of, like, the first people to ever, like, harness Gata energy from the stones. Mm-hmm. Which, I'm not sure how far back that dates, but Seth says, like, throughout all the history books and stuff he's read, which is apparently all of them, because
they had all of them at the place that they were at in the first episode.
I'm still on the fence of if Seth can even read. Apparently.
Well, it was a picture, guys. He can read pictures.
Oh, my bad.
But anyways, then after that they're like, okay, time to fight now. And so then it shows off the epic battle scenes. Okay, so I'm not talking about every single instance of this battle, but basically, Adam basically is like, oh yeah, we should fight up here, because when you summon your summon, he'll actually get whatever element of what is around here, so he'll become like wood in this area, even though there's no trees, it's just rock, but apparently he will become wood. And I'm like, okay, that's a nice thing to note that his Seth's summon crag is actually just takes from whatever earth is around him, which is like a bunch of twigs and stones and stuff, which is easily flammable, where Adam then shows Firefox, and I'm like, this is Fox, I'm coming in strong, make sure you do a barrel roll into the Kragus, and then burns it alive. And then Adam thinks that he won because he's like, wow, I burned your guardian, what are you going to do now? And then Adam does this weird T-pose move where he's like, I forget what his move was. He does like a 45-degree angle of that in the sky of his last cast before it cuts to... Okay, I kind of skipped ahead because now I need to mention this. So, those guys are on a cliff. Like, a really big cliff face that's nowhere near the camp. Like, it doesn't even show it, like, in perspective shot. But the first time that they start throwing stones, Eric's like, whoa, it seems like those two are fighting. Again, it doesn't show the cliffside or where they're at. It just shows the sky, and then a glint of I guess the stones, and then they're like, whoa, those guys are fighting. I'm like, how do you see that? I don't, as the person watching this episode, I don't even see where the cliff is. So how in relation to where you guys are you even seeing this? And Mel's like, that's okay, they're probably just doing fun fighting. And then Carol's like, bro, do you do fun fighting when we have arguments? It's like, no. And then, anyways, as those guys are battling, and that happens, and then it does the cut again to those guys being on the ground and being like, oh, he's doing this move. I forget what move it was that he did. But then Eric's like, whoa, he's doing this move, so Seth's getting serious. And again, it cuts again to the sky shot where it doesn't show them anywheres, but those guys are just looking at that same sky shot that we're looking at and saying, wow, we can see them from where they're fighting. And I'm like, you really don't. Like, I'm like, literally, if you just put, like, the hedge, like, where they are actually fighting in frame a little bit, so I could believe that, other than you see the little faint glimmer of the stone being front in the sky, then I would believe you. But, like, no, they're, like, not even anywhere close. It's just the glint of the stone, and they're like, wow, I see everything that's going on. And I can hear them from all the way over there, even though I definitely am more than, like, 50 meters away from these people. But okay, whatever you say. And then Mel's like, okay, maybe you guys are right. Maybe I should stop simping over Adam, and then we should probably leave him somewhere because he really is causing a problem for us, I guess. But as she was about to do that, apparently rats interrupt them as they were about to go, go over there and stop those two from fighting. And then they're like, because Kara turns around and is like, oh, there's rats. And then Eric's like, oh, they're so scary. And then Kara's like, haha, what are you? Some sort of little, like, I'm not going to say the word I was going to say, but I'm like, oh, are you scared of rats? And it's like, well, those are like rats. And I'm like, those don't even look like rats. They look like chinchillas maybe, if you're being, like a sort of type of rodent, but, like, these things are called rats. I'm like, they don't have the tail of a rat, but whatever.
Wanna know what they look like to me? I thought they looked like, the Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's like Kabu or something.
Yeah.
Karibo. Yeah, Karibo.
I mean, they kind of, but, like, even Karibo doesn't even have a tail. Like, the tail looks more canine than, like, a rat. And then also, like, they look kind of like gerbils if you kind of squint a little. But anyways, then those guys, then they see that the rats are then rummaging through their bags. But then as Mel and Eric was trying to stop them, Kara sees that a grasshopper is stuck and animated in midair. And it's not an animation error, it's actually literally frozen in time in midair. As those two try to run over to the rats and try to stop them, instantly those two get frozen as this guy in a cool mask jumps down from the sky and he said, hey, I'm glad I already captured two, only one more to go. And she's like, oh yeah? And then she's like, I'm going to capture you now. And he throws dice and tries to do a capture move. And then she uses her power boots to jump high. I can't wait for her to use this in more episodes. Again, so she dodges, and then she's like, okay, I gotta go get Seth's help. And then starts running away, and then Snare, the guy in the mask, basically goes, why do they always run? I'm like, if anybody's played Dead by Daylight, everybody's like, yeah, why do they always run?
Yeah, but why do the survivors run? They should just stand still, honestly.
And then anyway, so she starts running away, and then he somehow instant transmissions in front of her, and then he's like, well, I caught you, so now what are you going to do? And she's like, I'll do something. V-Moth, take flight. And then she's like, okay, instead of helping me, now go get Seth. And then she gets captured immediately. And I'm like, wow, that was an idea, I guess. He's like, and then even he was like, well, I'm glad that you did that, so now I don't have to hunt those two down. I can't wait to grab them in a little bit. Cutting back to their fight, Seth is now having tempo over Adam, and he almost falls off the cliff, but he saves him at the last second, luckily, because he almost fell off like a 50-foot drop that you couldn't see from every time it cut to those guys' perspective for some reason. Anyways, they were like, wow, okay, cool. But then they're like, V-Moth, why are you here? And it's like, something's not right. Kara would never let V-Moth this far out of her sight. We gotta go back. And they ride on V-Moth. They get back to the camp. And immediately, as they jump off V-Moth, V-Moth gets ratioed again for the... This is the 4th episode. Well, actually the 3rd episode, because they didn't even use V-Moth. Wait, did they use V-Moth in episode 3?
Nope.
No, yeah, because they knew they were going to get ratioed. But anyways, V-Moth get ratioed as soon as they can jump off of it, and then V-Moth returns to the cube, and then Snare, the guy Snare is like, hey, finally, wait, Adam, why are you here? And then Seth was like, Adam, do you know this guy? He's like, yeah, this is Snare. He's like the most famed bounty hunter in this region. And then he's like, well, it won't matter very soon because I'm gonna ratio you with my guardian. And then Seth is like, wow, your Guardian's kind of small. It would be a shame if I attacked it. And then as he throws the stone, Adam's like, wait, Seth, don't do it. And then he uses Blades of Destruction or whatever it's called, where he slices it in two, ricochets off of Snare's shields, and then hits it again to make it into 8. I want to note that it turns it into 8, because in the next scene it will turn it into 12 or 14, but we won't talk about it. But anyways, Adam then's like, oh, every time you hit his Guardian, it actually multiplies into more. So anytime you kill it, it actually just multiplies. I'm like, that seems like a really broken design for a Guardian, but also, like, why didn't you tell him this before he threw his stones? Yeah. And it's like, well, he really didn't think that far through. So then those two are basically on the back corners, because they used a lot of their energy fighting up on the mountain. So then those guys are trying to make sure that they don't die, because now they only have a few shields and, like, a few casts of certain stones. Snared does this really cool move where he's like, I'm going to use the drill wisp from Sonic Colors and make a hole underneath of you, and then you guys are going to fall to your deaths. And then, you know, because the only person who has the weapon for, like, just in case purposes, Adam, uses his Robin pole to then basically make it so they don't fall all the way down. And then they're like, cool, well, we didn't die, so are you ready to make the plans for when we get back out so we can try to take care of them? And he's like, yeah, I have the stones just for this. I forget what it was called, but it was like this carabel thing where he throws it up and then it makes like this tunnel thing, basically he's like, now here's my one-liner. It seems like your pets could go for a little run, so I just thought I should help you. And then Snare's like, oh wow, you're so funny, haha. By the way, you guys are almost out of stone energy, so you guys are about to get ratioed soon. And then they tried to use other stones to try to get the upper hand, but they weren't doing anything, and then he's like, it seems like you're running out of stone energy, so I guess it's time to end this. And then again, Seth looks at Mel and he's like, yeah, I guess it is time to end this. And then he's like, do it, Mel. And then Mel's like, Sub-Zero. And then he's like, Nani? And then all of his things try to attack Draco, but it's like flash freeze, and then it freezes all of them. Because the only way to defeat this Guardian, apparently, is by freezing them so they can't actually do anything. Because they don't die, technically, so they can't multiply, and they get frozen in place.
It's so... because it literally makes no sense, because she has been tied up for, like, how long, and she never thought to use this ability before?
Well, the thing is that, first of all, let's talk about the big elephant in the room. She's the only person who can summon her thing without using dice. That's the thing that we haven't talked about at all, but I just wanted to bring up now at the end of the episode, because it's like, yeah, she's unique, and also even in the opening of the show, it shows that she's unique for that one reason. But... the other reason why she didn't do it is because she's like, okay, well, we're going to wait until we can get a chance to understand what this guy has, because those guys got captured immediately, so she probably didn't want to play her trick up her sleeve, or ace up her sleeve immediately. And then, after doing that, it frees the Snare, but he breaks out of the ice, and then his mask falls off, and everybody's like, and then they're like, whoa, he's ugly, he's a scaly, he's ugly, and then he's like, bro... Shut the hell up. And then they're like, nah, you ugly, man. And he's like, I'll be back and I'll beat your asses for calling me ugly. And then he disappears with the smoke bomb, taking his Dagata Stone Guardian with him. And then, yay, they got rid of him.
Congratulations. You, like, it's weird. He turns out to be a lizard man. So
Which I mean, it kind of, I think it shows his tail a few times in some of the scenes, but you don't really make note of it. You're like...
yeah.
But, like, when I saw Snare, also, I thought he kind of looked cool. Even though they said he was ugly, I'm like, this is actually a pretty good design for, like, a bounty hunter character that's not a human.
I thought he was pretty... the exact quote that I put down in my notes when writing through is, Snare turns out to be Mark Zuckerberg. When cornered, Snare drops flash grenade and runs away.
But
I'll be back for you, defenders.
And then just leave.
But I think one thing that happens is he uses his like monsters to defend himself. I think one time, I think that happens. I'm pretty sure. 'Cause I have written down that he pulls a Kaboo from Yu-Gi-Oh! And just blocks an attack with his monsters.
Well, one of the shields that he has, which we'll see with one of the other characters, or did we see with this character? No, we'll see him with one of the characters later, is that also with the shield, with making like a huge barrier around you, you can also make multiple mini barriers. Because Adam tries to do an attack where he basically makes himself get supersonic speed, which we didn't talk about, but he does it because I want you guys to watch the episode to see how cool it is. Because I'm like, conceptually, I think this is very cool. Because Adam's like, I'm not going to use my stones actually for like throwing magic at him. I'm just going to use it to increase my offensive capabilities as a person. But anyways, but Snared basically was like, oh yeah, well of course I'm going to use my computers that multiply to kind of barrier, but like he had 4 individual barriers around him, which is kind of cool because we never seen barriers be able to do that until now, which I'm like, oh, that's a different use of that. And I wonder how they use it in the future, which again I know because I watched it. But basically the ending of the episode is basically after he leaves, Braggis is like, bro, I told you that you gotta capture them if you want to get paid, bro. Like, capture them. And he's like, I'll capture them next time, but like, I didn't know what I was going up against. Yeah, I know you said you needed me to capture 4 kids, but like, I didn't know they would have a 5th one, and also they would have powers. He's like, well, that's what I said, and then he hung up on Brackets, and I'm like, wow, Snare's a good villain, because he didn't listen to the other guy complain about his problems.
Yeah, this guy is based, bro.
And then Seth basically apologizes to Adam, saying, yeah, you don't need to leave anymore. You're kind of cool, and you did save us. He's like, nah, I'll leave, because obviously you were mad about me being here, and I understand, bro. And then anyways, he leaves, and then Seth takes those guys up the mountain to show where the monolith and stuff was, where then Adam's sitting, kind of being cool, sitting away from the group, looking at them from afar like Shadow the Hedgehog, watching over them, and then Mel turns to be like, huh? I thought I was being watched. You know, like what she should have did when Snare, you know, kind of did that before, where she's like, I'm looking in a random direction because I think that's where I'm getting looked at. But then she's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not getting watched. And then Adam reappears because of his cloak. And that's the end of the episode. Yay! And we made it through all 4 of the episodes. Hooray! And did you guys have anything else to add for, like, the last episode, the episode 4?
Honestly, I don't think so, but I did like Snare. He's a very good villain so far. And, yeah, I think that's it, honestly. Oh, yeah, also, I think they have a different language also. Because, there might be, like, a different language, because I'm pretty sure maybe it's in Snare's technology, or because it shows like these symbols and stuff, and you also see it on the on the rock statues when they go to fight. You see like a different language written, or maybe that's just their language.
Well, probably it's the overall universal language of like the GataDefender world, because I would assume that most of the language is written in sigils to begin with. So like probably it got updated probably because, you know, as time goes on, the language gets more and more advanced and updated, even if the English language is pretty horrible because it has a lot of things that contradict itself in the way that it works. But, you know, like, that's probably what was that mostly for, like, a lot of the old ancestry stuff where it's like, this is old stuff, but if you know to read old ancient text, then you can read it.
It's like, I'd say out of the 4 episodes, this one was probably my favorite one, as it just, like...
Oh, yeah. Easily peak.
It had a lot going on. Like, you know, we learned a lot, but we also see a lot of, like, actual action stuff going through. We, like... I'm gonna miss Adam for now, because he's a pretty interesting character. So I'm hoping to see him again. Shadow the Hedgehog. I found you, faker type beat.
Okay. And, like... Okay, so this is the part of the episode where now that we've talked about all 4 episodes, talked about our best and like stuff we wish we could have seen more of, and I think everybody can agree that episode 4 is like the best episode.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay. So like, okay, so for my rankings, because okay, now we're gonna go in order. Me, Jaquan, and then Trey. We're all gonna go ahead and rank our favorite episodes that we would probably watch again if it was cable television, to which one we would probably change the channel for. So basically, it's going to be ranked as the most watched to the one we would probably look at a different channel because we didn't want to watch this episode. So for me, it's definitely episode 4 because Snare.
Yeah, 100%.
This will be a trend probably going forward, but any episode with Snare in it seems to be a good episode because, like I said, at this point I have watched 8 episodes of the series, and I'm like, wow. Episodes with Snare in it are actually kind of goated and always has something cool in it. Thank you. So I'm like, so episode 4 is definitely my first. I would definitely watch episode 1 again because considering everything, episode 1 is not a bad episode and it has the funniest faces in probably these sets of episodes and the funniest jokes. Considering that, you know, it's the first episode and, you know, not all first episodes are usually bad, I wouldn't say, but not all episodes are usually kind of good and also keep a good pace the whole way through. So I definitely would watch number 1. And then, again, out of the 3 and 2, obviously I'm going to watch 3 before I watch 2 because 2 is like the one I would definitely be like, I'm not watching this episode because this episode's bad, and I'd have changed the channel.
Yeah, I feel like number 3 is like if there was like nothing else on, I'd watch it. But if for episode 2 it'd be like I would just not watch it no matter what.
Yeah, because as soon as you see, because at least for me, as soon as I seen episode 2, I was like, yeah, I'm already like I'm the resident sleeper. I'm watching this at work. Most of these episodes that I watch, by the way, I'm watching them at work when I have breaks or I get time to watch these episodes. So I'm taking the notes and digesting this stuff while at work. So imagine me watching episode 2, being like, after watching episode 1 at work, and being like, oh, I'm excited to watch this next episode, and I'm like, wow, now I get to complain about this while I continue to do my work for like the next 40 minutes because I'm like, wow, I can't believe I watched this.
I'd say for my rankings, it'd probably be 2. 2 is definitely at the bottom because it's like, doesn't have substance. It feels dragged out a lot more. The introduction of Adam is like cool, but it also like, it feels weird. The flow feels odd for it. It's like, I wouldn't say it's a bad episode, but out of all of them, it's like definitely the worst one there.
So do you want to start from like your top to your bottom? So like we all know that 2 is the bottom for each of us. Yeah. So then you would probably so what would you say for like the rest of the ones? Like from the ones that you would definitely watch, and then to like I guess I would watch, but I'm like
I'd say for the top, I'd probably be going with 4 because 4 just like. It delivers the most upon, like, the things that we have. I love, like, Adam's probably my favorite character right now, so getting to see more of him is nice. Like, seeing all that stuff mixed up with a new character being added in, who's, like, so far the villains have just, like, been there as, like, yeah, nerd emoji, or, like, no brains, all bronze style, but, like, he feels, like, actual methodical and stuff, because, like, he's supposed to be, he's a hunter based off of cold-blooded reptiles and stuff, so, like, it makes sense that he'd be the bounty hunter who stalks from afar and stuff. So he fits well in his role as not only, like, an animal of the reptile, like, Mark Zuckerberg, but, like, also as, like, a bounty hunter.
And then and which one out of 2 or 3 would you watch then after 4?
I would say 3 for me, honestly, because, like... 3, it's when all the action really, like, kicks up. Like, the number 1, it's good and all. It begins you off, though, like, you're learning all these stuff about the kids, and it's not as action-packed, not as filling for you, since, like, you know, it's the first episode. It's just, like, mainly plot for the first, like, 15 minutes of the episode.
Which is fair, because I'm like, again, if I had to choose, again, for me personally, like I said, I would only choose 1 over 3 because, again, the funniest stuff that came out of this and why it's the thumbnail for this first episode is the 2 smug faces. So I'm like, for me, I'm like, yeah, I'd watch episode 1 just to see the stupid jokes where I'm misogynist and also, yeah, this is very good.
Yeah.
Alright, so yours is 4, 3, 1, and then 2?
Yep, I'd say that.
I'd say mine's about the same, honestly.
As his?
Yeah, like, I'd say 4, probably, like, 3, because 3's good, then 1, 2.
Okay, perfect. So, I guess in the orders of what we would recommend, everybody's in complete agreement that 4 would be number 1, then 2nd would be number 3, because for me it doesn't really matter between number 3 and number 1, but since these 2 picked number 3, we'll say that it's 4, 3, 1, and then 2.
Yeah.
For, like, our ranking. Which, again, I don't think even episode 1 is that bad. Again, it's not action-oriented until the last bit, and then even still, I'm like, the action was like, okay, they had to use their trump card, and then they won. Wow, that was so...
Yeah, it's like it's not bad, but it feels like, you know, having to use the trump card in the first episode, because you can't deal with the first villain there, it's like...
But I mean, it's only to set up even Melko better in the 3rd episode, which is fair.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, without the foreshadowing of being like, oh, this is the thing that literally melted that thing in that one episode, and then using it on a dude who's like, yo, I literally just stood up from that. They're like, whoa, bro, this guy is actually built different. But no, okay, well, perfect. That basically almost wraps up the rest of our episodes. So, the last thing that we're gonna do is that now that we've finished watching episodes 1 through 4 of the GataDefenders on the Pod-Gata podcast, alright, you two, I'm gonna start, we're gonna go Trey, Shaquan, and then me. because I technically am unfair on this. Are you excited? Would you be excited to watch more of this show now that you watched these 4 episodes?
Yes, I would, honestly. It's a very good show, and I'm honestly kind of hooked right now.
I'd say, with me personally, the big difference between a lot of like Americanized television, because I'm a big fan of anime and stuff. It's the reason I like anime so much is because it always like it has a plot, a storyline you're following, and like you don't see that with a lot of like just some Americanized shows. But like something I really like about this is like there's a clear plot, clear story we're going through, we're learning. So I definitely like recommend it. And I'm definitely excited to watch the next couple episodes.
And as for me, who made this podcast literally to review this series, even though episode 2 was like the worst, like again, for me, episode 2 literally dropped me off so hard that I thought I wasn't going to recover for the next 2 episodes. But thank you for episode 3 and 4 for saving it, because, again, episode 2 was really, really bad. It really was rough, but it saved the rest of the episodes because of how rough episode 2 was, and then how stellar episode 4 was for a cap-off point. So for me, I'm definitely excited to see more. And again, because I'm already saying this as somebody who's watched more already, episodes 5 through 8 probably won't disappoint that much. But I definitely think that these first 4 episodes, if you were to watch this series and watch it in that order, you would probably understand exactly where we come from. Obviously, again, if any of you want to watch any of the series, again, link in the description or in the bio or description of wherever you're listening to this podcast on. But, yeah, I guess that's going to be it for this Cable Bash podcast for Pod-Gata Defenders. And, yeah, my lovely folks on the internet, next time when we come back, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later, we'll be back with more GataDefenders. So again, as long as you guys are around, and remember, if you ever need strength, just remember that you can cast the power.
And make sure you push past your limits.
Dragon Ball reference.
Oh yeah, and also if you like the video, make sure to hit the like button. Please share this because we want this podcast to go off the ground. Because we have more shows that I want to cover. Like we got Spider Riders. If anybody knows that, that's also a pretty beast Western anime style like cartoon or anime, whatever you want to call it. We got Grossologist that I also have on here. We got even something that's called Splat-A-Lot, which used to be a television show that had real life stuff, real life people competing for the Splat Crown. You know, we have all the stuff that we have in store, so as long as we get your guys' viewership and support, we will continue to do the podcast. This podcast will probably come up every bi-weekly because I just want to make sure that, editing's consistent, everybody gets a chance to watch it, and, all this other stuff. But thank you all so much for joining us at the Pod-Gata Defenders podcast. And next time when we come back, we'll be casting the power in another set of episodes. So until then, see you guys later.
Let's go.
Bye.
See you later, guys.